I've always been me, I guess I know myself. Shakiness, man, I don't have no time for that. My dude skis too turned up, I'll take the fine for that. What's up, my dudes? MXGP 2020 versus Supercross 4. You know, I had to at least make this video right here. So, very interesting when you play Supercross 4 and then you go back and you play MXGP 2020. That's kind of some of the main comparisons I'm trying to make here just from my own personal experience. So first of all, right off the bat, I'll just keep it straight up real with you like I always do. No sugarcoat, no beating around the bush. I like the main menu and the, like, you know, UI, you know, all that kind of, the menu screens and everything. I like the way that shit looks better in the Supercross games, period, when you compare them to any of the MXGP games. Obviously, minus, like, you know, MXGP 3, that was kind of cool back in those days, but, like, ever since like MXGP 2019, MXGP 2020, I feel like they have just dropped the ball on these like menu screens. It's just so basic. It's so like, I don't know. There's just something about it. It's just not very eye appealing to me. It's just not very exciting. Just basic, boring looking menus. So with this recent update, this is going to be a little confusing because now we've gotten certain updates in MXGP 2020 and we've gotten certain updates in Supercross 4. So it's like, well, how do do you compare it pre-updates? Do you compare it after updates? Because for instance, right here, they just added an update to MXGP 2020 that has now added the leaderboards to the time attack mode in the game, which I know, right? You would think that'd already be in the game because it's already in a bunch of other milestone games, but that is one thing I will say about MXGP 2020 is there is just certain elements of this game that just feel so stripped. So, like, where the hell is that? And I'm not talking about, like, I'm talking about things that were already in previous milestone games that have just been stripped out of this game for no apparent reason. Number one, the ghost mode in time attack. There is no ghost mode. There is no ghost in time trial of this game at all. There's just not at all. Which it was literally in, what, back in MXGP Pro? And even games before that, if I'm not mistaken. So that's just one thing, you know. And then the wet track mode, there is no wet track mode in this game. You know how all the way back in MXGP Pro there was clear, wet track, rainy mode, and random. When you go in there and you select the weather condition on a track, this game only has, let me flip over right quick. This game only has clear and rainy mode. That's it. You don't have wet track mode and you don't have random. So, one thing I want to talk about with the gameplay here before we get too much further on, because that's what most of you guys are probably interested in, right? This game is actually, you know, Supercross 4 and MXGP 2020 are actually somewhat similar feeling on the bike. I feel like the speed of the game, I feel like Supercross 4 might just be slightly faster. You know, it doesn't feel as slow and sluggish as MXGP 2019, MXGP 2020. They definitely seem to have sped the shit up a little bit again in Supercross 4. But this game right here, to me, you can tell the suspension and kind of, you know, you're not really going to pop off the bike in this game. They've toned all that back. You know, a lot of times when you crash in this game or Supercross 4, it's more of like how I just crashed there before where you know, the bike will land and then kind of like the front end will flip over or the ass end will flip back. You know, you crash more from flipping in a certain direction. You don't really crash from actually just landing hard on something and popping off the bike. But one of the drastic differences between the two of these games is the track designs. Yes, I know one of them's a MXGP game, one of them's a Supercross game, but still yet, the skill gap and the fun factor and the whole entire jumping side of MXGP 2020 is not even in the same stratosphere of how it is in Supercross 4. There is so much more to the whole jumping side of Supercross 4 than there is here in MXGP 2020. I mean, holy shit, you come off the ground more in MXGP fucking 3 than you do in MXGP 2020. It's insane. It's not just comparing the milestone motocross games like, oh, of course you're going to come off the ground more in a Supercross game, Spencer. No, you don't even come off the ground as much in this game as you do in MXGP 3. It's insane how much they have shortened, smoothed off, made all the jumps so much smaller in this game. It's just insane how they've done that. It's unreal. So that is definitely a drastic difference. You know, Supercross 4 is going to have way more of a jumping, bouncing, leaning. You know, yeah, there's some leaning in this game. You know, you have some leaning forward and backwards, but it don't even really matter because you're never even really coming off of the ground. You don't have to lean. You don't have to seat bounce to hit anything in this game. Whereas Supercross 4, it's like critical on some of those tracks to seat bounce to hit a specific 3-in rhythm or quad or whatever, right? So let's go into Supercross 4, do a little comparing here. I certainly think you're going to get, it all depends on the kind of gamer that you are. I know there's a lot of people that are like trying to defend MXGP 2020 because they think they're getting, you know, the game's getting some hate and stuff like that. You can see right here, there's my Ghost. You know, they had Ghost in the games before MXGP 2020, and they have Ghost in the games after MXGP 2020. But it's not in MXGP 2020. Same with the wet track mode. Same with a lot of things, right? But there's that triple daddy. Then you got a quad up over to that. But yeah, I mean, there is just so much more. For me, okay, let me just explain this. For me personally, like any sort of dirt bike game out there, I don't care if it's a motocross game, a supercross game, whatever the heck, there's two elements to the gameplay really, right? You have your ground physics, and then you have your air physics, and that's what really makes up any kind of a dirt bike game. You know, you have your ground physics like cornering, leaning on the ground, how much the bike spins out and all that kind of stuff. And then you have, you can almost, I think you can jump to there. And then you have your air physics, which is going to be like your seat bouncing, how much gravitational pull the bike has, the leaning forward and backwards to huck the bike. But the whole thing is if your track designs play a big part in that, right? That's one of the biggest problems with MXGP 2020. You know, it's not so much the physics, the air physics of that game. It's more so the way they designed the tracks in the game. They just designed them so basic and small jump, super boring jump designs for an arcade motocross game specifically. You know what I'm saying? Ooh, that's a stretch. But when you get in here to Supercross 4, you instantaneously get this feeling of like, there's just as much attention, fun factor, replayability, skill gap to the air physics of this game as there is to the ground physics of this game. Whereas when you go to, woo, that triple that table right there is pretty tough too. When you go to MXGP 2020, it feels like all the attention was just put into the ground. You know, there just wasn't all the fun factor. The whole game is like ground physics. It's not air physics at all. There's just no balance to that with MXGP 2020. So 100% just simply for the track designs and the more balance to the ground and air physics fun factor. That's why I like Supercross 4 better than MXGP 2020 straight up. And, you know, it would be one thing if, like, MXGP 2020 had all this super cool-ass, like, pre-made braking bumps and pre-made, you know, roughness and, you know, kickers and ruts up all the jump faces and, like, this super motocrossy feel to it. Let me go to a different track right here to show you something real quick, okay? It'd be one thing if MXGP 2020 had more of that motocrossy, you know, hardcore 3 inside pre-made ruts, then you wouldn't care so much about the jumps, but it doesn't have any of that. It's like the same old flat style, not as much, no real, I mean, there's a little bit of pre-made on some of the MXGP 2020 tracks, but not much at all. So, that's one aspect of it. When you don't have the jump fun factor, you got to get fun factor from somewhere. You know what I mean? And that's one of the biggest negatives to MXGP 2020. So let's go. Wonder if Glendale's going to show much deformation. Not so sure, but we'll go take a look-ski. I need to go to an actual race here to do this. So yeah, just a little, you know, another thing that makes Supercross 4 better than MXGP 2020, at least Supercross 4 has some kind of terrain deformation to it. I'm not saying it's a lot. MXGP 3 still has the most terrain deformation of any of the games, any of the milestone games. Reflex has the most of any dirt bike game, period, but at least Supercross 4 has some. I can't even say that about MXGP 2020. MXGP 2020 has the lowest amount of terrain deformation that we have ever seen in any milestone game ever before since they started doing terrain deformation. You see what I'm saying? Some people would say the graphics of MXGP 2020 actually look better than Supercross 4. I know they have started to update the graphics here in this game. But yeah, let me try to rip this holy. Okay. Have I ever even rode on this track? I don't know. Let me see here. But yeah, this game to me just feels like so much more time was put into developing this shit right here. It just really does. It's just more of a full fun. You can already see the rut coming off of that dude's back tire right there. Let me try to stay behind him here so you can see it. Look at that. See, it's deforming right there beside me. We're crossing back over all these dudes off the finish. Old Dean Wilson. Yeah, this track's pretty sick right here. But yeah, it just feels like there's not as many of those weird like missing features in Supercross 4. Feels like more of a completed game. I don't feel as much lag in this game as I did with MXGP 2020. I know that game had quite the issue with that. So I don't think there's as much of a lag issue at this game. It just feels like a more completed, a more fulfilling experience of a game. You know what I'm saying? That's what I would say about this game right here. And we'll go in there and look at the compounds here in a second. Whoa, there, Spence. I lost my front end, guys. Have you ever heard that before? I'm on the podium. I'd like to thank my sponsors. Coors Light makes Supercross great again. New Balance Daddy. I'd like to thank New Balance. I appreciate you for all the support. And yeah, I just lost my front end out there, Ricky. You know, it's getting a little loose on the top. You know, it's no big deal, but yeah, dog. But yeah, that's one thing you're going to notice right away is just the jump peaks. And yes, I understand this is a Supercross game. We're comparing it to an MXGP game, but you got to understand, man. They could have made those jumps bigger on MXGP 2020, even with it being a motocross game. For instance, just go back to MXGP 3. That is still an MXGP game, but has literally 3 times the jump fun factor as what MXGP 2020 has. It's like they got way too focused in on trying to make this shit one-to-one scaling or like too realistic. I don't know what the fuck they were doing with the jump size and scaling on MXGP 2020, but they were way off with that, dog. So you can kind of see the deformation here. Like, it's not insane by any stretch of the imagination, but at least you can see something there. You know what I mean? At least you can see it right there in this corner. You know, at least you can see something there. I'm telling you, we're having to compare like little by little shit because you don't hardly see anything at all with the terrain deformation on MXGP 2020. There's times where it feels like there literally is no terrain deformation at all in MXGP 2020. It's insane. It is unbelievable. But yeah, I mean, that is the one argument that you might be able to make. Let me get hot back in there in MXGP 2020. We'll try to remember like this deformation right here. You see it in this corner. You know, this is what, 3 laps in? So just see it all across the start right there. Literally 3 laps into this shit. And I'll go show you what it does here in MXGP 2020. Okay, here we are back in MXGP 2020. And you can definitely see the graphics. I mean, you can't say that Supercross 4's graphics are all that much better than this right here. They're really not. Some people would say Supercross 4's graphics are actually a little worse. I can definitely see where those people are coming from. That is the one thing that I've said this whole time about MXGP 2020 is the graphics. It is graphically like the best milestone game we've ever had before. Potentially the best motocross game we've ever had before. And that's kind of the whole point. I can't help but feel like this game was just a like a next gen game, you know? It's just a next gen graphical eye candy, make it look real good and have this subpar basic ass gameplay to it, you know? And it's just trying to show off like these super graphics to this whatever next gen, you know, Unreal Engine shit that they're using. You know, that's the vibe you get from this game. It feels like every bit of the attention, every bit of the time was put into making the shit look good and not actually be up to par with the speed of the game. You know, upgrades to terrain deformation, they actually took a step backwards on that. There's no upgrades to like more roughness on the tracks, more pre-made, I mean, ever so slightly. There's a couple tracks that have just a little more pre-made vibe, but not a lot. Not a lot at all. So you can kind of see what this track looks like here on lap 1. I'm telling you, you could run about 30 laps on this track and you're not really going to notice much at all with the terrain deformation, man. You're just not. It's just, as soon as I get back into this game, I can just feel it. It's just not as fun. It's not as fun. And it's just as simple as that. And just to clarify, a bunch of these little ruts you think you're seeing on the track right here, that shit was already there on the first lap. Pretty much all of it was already there on the first lap. Like a little, you know, like a little design in the dirt, right? Little like visual design in the dirt to make it look like there's all these little ruts there. But the deformation itself did not go through here and make all these little ruts. It ain't doing much at all. I'm just telling you. And you'll see what I'm saying when we get 4 or 5 laps into this shit. But, yeah, there's just no like fear of jumping anything in this game. You don't really have like a scared fear fun factor. Oh my God, can I hit that? Oh man, I came up short on that, you know. That's been one of my biggest complaints about these milestone motocross games specifically. That's what makes motocross games what they are, is the roughness, the pre-made braking bumps, and the pre-made ruts. Without that, you don't have a whole lot. You really don't in these motocross games. That's one of the biggest things that made Reflex so amazing, was how rough some of the tracks got with the terrain deformation. You know, like on Sandwick and blowing them fucking sand ruts out, making these gnarly ass trenches and shit on the tracks. That's what made Reflex what it was, dog. And that carried over even to the Supercross tracks. You could have like a super ruddy ass vibe on a bunch of the different Supercross tracks, depending on how many laps you ran. But like, this has the worst of both worlds, if you will, as far as a motocross game. It doesn't have the pre-made roughness level, and it doesn't even have the physics to make the roughness actually really affect the bike. You see what I'm saying? The rollers don't really have any skill gap in this game at all. It just feels like the rollers just slow your momentum down to nothing, and it feels like you don't even hardly have any momentum to begin with in this game, so you definitely don't want anything that's really going to rob your momentum, because the game's already so slow as it is anyways. And then there's just not a bunch of like ruts going up jump faces. They 100% could have made the speed of this game like 10 to 20% faster feeling. You know, like how fast everything's moving to you on the screen, right? And they 100% could have made the jump scaling and the jump peaks like 25 to 50% more than they are in this game. If you don't believe me, just go back to MXGP 3 and feel the speed of that game and how far you jump off the ground in that game. They're taking steps backwards with that whole vibe, and there's no question about it. Are the graphics amazing in this game? Yes. But that's really the only step forward that this game has taken at all. It's more boring in every other way than a lot of those other milestone games. It just is. I mean, there's just no doubt about it. Like, I don't know. Just boring, man. That's the only way I can explain. I just think a lot of you guys, you're getting tricked up in the graphics. It's making you think it's like this whole vibe because of all these superior graphical, you know, kind of kind of level that this game has to it, but when you actually get into the gameplay, it's not what you think it is. It's not as good as you think it is, or whatever kind of vibe you got in your head, but like, you can see this terrain deformation not affecting me at all on the bike right here, not even in the slightest. Whatever you think was the terrain deformation was shit that was already there on the first lap. I'm just telling you right now, this is not shit that was actually developed here. It doesn't do hardly anything, man. I'm telling you, there is more terrain deformation in Supercross 4 than there is MXGP 2020. Straight up, no doubt about it. But, yeah, let's go. Let me get off of this spot right here. Let's go to the compound. I mean, I've heard some people say, you know, the playground in this game is like more for... make sure it's on daytime. I've heard some people talk about, you know, oh, Spencer, you know, the playground on MXGP 2020 is so much more for the enduro guys. It's more of an enduro track than the Supercross 4's compound. Oh, my God. I don't know where some of you guys are getting that sort of defense for this, but, like, dude, there's no reason for them to have prevented you from jumping as much as they did on this compound right here. Does this compound look amazing visually? Yes, it does. It is visually amazing. Is it another standard-ass woodland compound? Yeah. And Supercross 4 is another standard woodland compound. But, like, there's just nowhere near the free ride, big jump, freestyle, Mac Daddy, fatty, whip it over a 200-foot jump like you expect in a free ride track. That's what this free ride track right here is just completely missing. Pretty much everything that you expect in a free ride track, this track doesn't really have it. With the way all this shit is laid out, it's like this mountain in the middle that just doesn't allow you to get a whole lot of speed up to any bigger, you know, mountainous jump face or whatever. And Supercross 4 has definitely made a better compound in that sense. It's like, this just feels like more of a weird little trail up a mountain, you know, like a little mountain bike trail than it does like a full-blown free ride track in a motocross game. You see what I'm saying? You just cannot come off the ground on this free ride track nowhere near like you would on the Supercross 4's compound. I just think they're going backwards with these compounds, man. Like, ever since Supercross 3, they've been going backwards with these compounds. The shit is just not as fun as it would have been riding on the compound Supercross 4. So, either way, that is certainly one aspect. It's just so, wherever there could have potentially been a possibility to hit some big, you know, mountain jump or whatever, they make the shit too steep at the top of what would be the jump face to where you can't even really hit it like you would want to hit it. You understand what I'm saying? Like, even in the places where you might be able to get the speed to hit it, it's either just too smoothed off or it's too hardcore of a rocky-ass jump face to where you can't even get good airtime off of it. And that's one of the biggest elements to free riding. It really is. So, at least with Supercross 4, they kind of got back into doing, I'll go back to it right here. So, when you compare these games side by side, I mean, yeah, like, I can see where, you know, the whole graphical thing, it's not like Supercross 4 looks a lot worse than MXGP 2020. I can just see where some people would think it looks slightly worse, specifically on the rider model in the bike. I know they tried to update on that, but, like, and maybe the lighting is just not quite as good here in Supercross 4 as it is. Oh, my God. There's that T. In MXGP 2020, you know. But, yeah. Both of these games do have a similar first-person camera vibe improvements compared to all the other Milestone games. I think both these games definitely, you know, did a pretty good job on improving on the first-person side of it. But, yeah, I just wasn't real impressed with either one of these games' little, like, side tracks on their compound, you know? All those little side tracks on MXGP 2020 are pretty pitiful. They're so basic, just so basic. Small jump, and then same thing with here in Supercross 4. Like, what are they doing with these free ride compounds, little tracks, man? They were so much better back in Supercross 3. But at the end of the day, when you compare both these games, I just feel like these Supercross games are just, as a whole, they're just so much more of an experience than a lot of these previous MXGP games have been. Ever since, like, MXGP Pro, I feel like the Supercross games have just been outdoing them. Like, straight up, in pretty much every way. Other than the graphics with MXGP 2020, right? But MXGP 2019, MXGP 2020 are just some of the most boring milestone games that I've ever played before. Yeah, MXGP Pro had a very janky feeling to it, but MXGP 2019, MXGP 2020, they're just boring. And I guess that all comes down to what kind of motocross gamer are you? Like, if you're super casual, which is where a lot of you guys lie, you know, some of you guys are just very, very casual. You watch Supercross on TV, you just want to hop into a random-ass dirt bike game and just play it, and it's, like, super easy, and that's what you want, you know? You want, like, this super easy gaming experience. You don't want this complicated, you know, and I think that's where a lot of you dudes are kind of somewhat finding the liking in MXGP 2020, because it's made for the casual, the basic casual motocross gamer. Amazing graphics, works on next gen, the gameplay's super slow, the jumping is not complicated at all, there's no real roughness that you're going to flip over, or, you know, some, like, gnarly-ass rut coming off a jump face that's going to get you squirrely or whatever. So, yeah, I mean, if you're like a super casual motocross, you know, gamer, then yeah, MXGP 2020, you know, I can see where some of you guys are going to like that. But if you're anything more than a super casual motocross gamer, Supercross 3 and 4 are just so much better. There's just so much more to the feeling and gameplay on the bike. There's so much more to it. So much more to the games. Like I say, these games just have so much more air physics side of the games to them. So, but yeah, dogs. Either way, that's the main comparison. Definitely let me know down in the comments. Look at this right here, though. Look at how high I can get off. Oh, there we go. Smithy boy getting a little high out here. Little trippy SX 420 Blaze It. You know, look at how much higher I'm jumping. It's like this free ride track right here doesn't feel like they're restricting you from hitting a big jump like the MXGP 2020 track feels like, free ride compound, right? But, yeah. Oh, my God. Even that right there, like, holy shit. It just makes a free ride track so much more fun to me to be able to hit stuff like that. But, you know, to some of you guys saying that the MXGP 2020 compound is like more for enduro dudes, dog, come on now. There's like 2 or 3 spots on that track where you can go under the little log, and there's like a couple little enduro areas, but it ain't really all that much of an enduro free ride track either. Even talking about the MXGP 2020 free ride compound, even still, it ain't even really that much of a enduro track, even as it is. But either way, I think both these games need to get more compounds in them, at least 2 or 3. So, yeah. When you compare the two, I think there's not even a question about it, which one's more worth your money, which one you're going to spend more time in. Because like I say, you know, if you make a dirt bike game that is all centered around one aspect of dirt bike gaming, you know, if you make an entire dirt bike game that's just all about the ground physics and shit on the ground, and you don't put enough emphasis on the air physics and air skill gap, it's only going to feel like half of a dirt bike game. That's what a lot of these milestone games have felt like to me. They've just felt like half of a dirt bike game because of that reason specifically. So either way, man, definitely let me know down in the comments which one and for what reasons, why you like a certain one of these games over the other one. But for me personally, it's not even a question. You know, I think you should buy Supercross 2, 3, and 4 over MXGP Pro, MXGP 2019, or MXGP 2020. You know, these past 3 Supercross games have just straight up been outdoing these milestone MXGP games. And there's really no question about that to me. But gameplay is a big part of it for me. You know, I can look past all those eye candy ass graphics and actually get into what's going to keep you coming back more and more and more. I feel like MXGP 2020, it'll give you a certain little vibe the first time you play it because it looks so much better than any other milestone game, you know? So it kind of gives you like this little eye candy type vibe to it. It's kind of like, oh, okay, kind of go to all the tracks, ride on them 1 or 2 times, but like Supercross 4 is going to have so much more of that replayability with the learning the lines and the bigger rhythms and the seat bouncing, leaning, and it actually affecting the bike and making you go a lot faster on the track. You shall not pass there, Spency boy. So I just think replayability-wise, unless you are a super casual motocross gamer, look at that jump. Little Kevin Windham ass action out here. Unless you are, that's the only way I can see you possibly liking MXGP 2020 better, is if you are the most casual motocross gamer out there, period. But even still then, you should be able to see the skill gap and the more replayability value that you're going to have here with the gameplay of Supercross 4 versus MXGP 2020. You still should be able to tell, especially if you played any of those other milestone games. But either way, man, and not to mention, you know, the Supercross 4 has Ghost, has more of a terrain deformation system, has a wet track mode, and not just a rainy track mode like MXGP 2020. You can't really deny all of the stripped features of MXGP 2020 that we got back in Supercross 4. You just can't deny it, dog. You can't. So, either way, man, appreciate you guys watching all the videos. Later, dudes. Oh, and not to mention, you know, you have an injury system in the career mode of Supercross 4. You have the futures system in the career mode of Supercross 4. You don't have any of that in MXGP 2020. So, yeah, just another little thing I wanted to mention right there. You know, your career mode seems to be a little more fleshed out here in Supercross 4. Yeah, and they're just now getting to the point where they're adding, like, you know, private lobbies online in MXGP 2020 and some things that just should have been in there from the very beginning. Make you scratch your head on how the hell they didn't have that in there from the very beginning. But either way, Supercross 4 is better. No question about it. Other than graphically. I think that's the only aspect you can somewhat say that MXGP 2020 might just be slightly better than Supercross 4, but I think they're going to update Supercross 4 to the point to where it's going to look just as good anyway. So, either way, boys, signing out. Don't want to make this video 10 hours long. Later, dudes.